Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids, and it's Tuesday, so it's time for our Facebook Live. I wanted to talk to you today about bilingualism, excuse me, because something that I often do in my practice is I consult with families of who are raising their children bilingual. Oftentimes those families have children who have speech and language needs, which is why they call me. But the issues around bilingualism are really interesting and sometimes misunderstood. So I figured we would spend some time talking about it here. So the question most often that I get asked is, what language should I speak to my child? And the answer is complicated, of course, and also not so complicated. Basically, the rule of thumb is speak the language that you are most comfortable speaking to your child. And here's why. Number one, you're going to speak it better, right? You're going to speak your native language in the most natural, most comfortable, easiest, most connected way. Especially when you're dealing with a child, because as you know, you are tired when you have a baby, and even when you have a small child. And when you're tired, you just want to lean in to something that's comfortable and be really not having to think about the words you're choosing, not having to think about how you're saying things, because when you are natural and when you are just speaking the language that you know how to speak because that's your native language, the connection with your child is going to be so much stronger because you don't have that filter in the way of having to choose your words, because you're not pausing to think. So when you're speaking your native language to your child, even if that language is different from the one that's spoken around you, you are going to just be able to strengthen your connection with your child in a much deeper way. All those little endearments are going to come out in your native language in a way that they probably don't in your second language. So that's the first thing. Speak the language in which you're most comfortable. If you're fully bilingual, play with it. You know, that there are people who are full dual bilingual, and that's great. It is a total gift that you can give to your child to speak a language other than the language they hear at school or in their community to their kids. And I think there's even more, a greater understanding of that these days. We understand a lot more about the benefits of being bilingual. Turns out it's really good for your brain to be bilingual. And it gives you it may help you be a better problem solver, to see different angles, certainly to understand other people in the world, and understand other cultures more easily. So it's just a big gift. And I think a gift that people are choosing to give their children more frequently. So that's a little bit about, okay, so if you have for our purposes, I live in the United States. You have a non-native English speaker raising a child in the United States. They're speaking their language at home and English in the community with other people. But the question that also comes up is, can I expect my child who has a speech and language issue to speak another language, to become bilingual? And the answer to that is yes, but we might adjust the expectations a little bit depending on what their needs are. So, excuse me, that's a decision that happens between you and your speech therapist. But the broader question of, can a child with a speech and language issue be bilingual? Of course is the answer to that. Particularly if they are being raised in a multilingual or bilingual household. It's important, again, back to that relationship piece, right? This is not just about the words we use. This is how we connect with other people. It's important that the child be able to connect fully with their family. And so it's important that that child, if they're being raised, for example, in the United States, but their parents speak another language, that that child have access to both, even if they have a speech or a language impairment. So another question that comes up around bilingualism is, won't it cause a speech delay or a language delay? And the research is really, really clear on this. The answer is no, it will not. In the same way, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about signing with your baby. In the same way that teaching your baby to sign will not cause a speech delay, teaching your baby or your child another language will not cause a language or a speech delay. It can mask an existing speech or language delay. So sometimes I think teachers, in particular, pediatricians, people who are dealing with bilingual families, maybe don't have all the facts and aren't aware that you can have a global language processing issue that comes up in both languages. But the fact of being bilingual doesn't cause you to have a speech and language delay. In fact, if anything, you've got 2 words instead of 1, so you've got a bigger vocabulary early on than most other people, and that's it's important to remember, because it's related, but it's not the same. Being bilingual can impact a language issue, but those 2 things are not. One is not causing the other. Just trying to think about bilingual. Other questions that come up. There's interesting research about how many languages you can speak to a child. And I think this becomes a question when you've got parents who maybe are not native speakers of a different language than the majority language in their home. But it turns out you can speak up to 4 languages with your child. I don't recommend that you do that, because you would have to be really, really sort of careful and cognizant of how you were doing that. But 2, 3, no problem for many, many, many children and many families. I think once you're doing 3, you have to be sort of again aware of how you're using them. Sometimes families choose for one person to speak one language, the other parent to speak the other language, and then when they're in public, for example, they speak the majority home language. But there are different ways to do it. You can speak the minority language at home and the majority language in public. My husband and I are raising our kids bilingual. In particular, when they were very, very young, he only spoke to them in Spanish and I only spoke to them in English. And they learned very, very quickly, and it was super fun and interesting to see how that happened. That they would just switch and address him in Spanish and address me in English almost in the same breath. And it's really fun to see. So for families who, I started to talk about this a little bit before, for families who are not native speakers of a different language, so for monolingual parents, you can expose your child to another language by, for example, hiring a caregiver who speaks another language or putting them in a daycare situation. There's a lot of research that bilingual education is really good for kids, again, along those same lines. So you can do some things that will expose your child to another language. The question is going to be sort of later on, will they be able to maintain it? And that's, it's something that you can think about and talk about how to do it. Are you going to move to the country so that you all learn to speak a different language? Are you going to send your child to a bilingual school where they will learn how to read and write in that different language, even if you don't speak it at home? There are lots of different ways to do that. if you're being a little bit conscious about it. So anyway, some tips, some thoughts on bilingualism for today. And I'll see you on Friday, 10 o'clock. Take care. Bye-bye.